So you clicked on this video because you wanted to learn about the Leverage Engine framework, which is a framework that I've built specifically for business owners like you that are looking to optimize their systems and create a clear roadmap as to how best to create the infrastructure that allows you to scale your business. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So the Leverage Engine framework, why this framework matters is because this is for $500 to $1 million plus businesses that are drowning in their own success. What this means is you're either facing back-end chaos, team bottlenecks, or profit leaks, but if you add everything together, you see that it all leads to one main thing, which is revenue loss. So the point of this isn't just to hustle harder, but is to dominate a lot smarter through systems, and this is where your leverage begins. And with this isn't just a feel-good checklist, it's an operating system that I've been able to build that solves $100,000 plus problems and builds the infrastructure that allows you and your business to scale to millions. I've watched $1 million businesses burn 100K per year on inefficiencies they didn't even know existed. That's why this framework exists. This is the reason why I've decided to build out this framework to help business owners like you understand the things that you may not even have considered before. So when I look at this, I mainly focus on three main things, which is precision, execution, and leverage. Those are the main things that you need to keep in mind as we go through this document. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So think of each system as a high performance engine. One engine handles lead flow, which means people are coming into your business, and another powers payments, which means people are actually paying you for your services or products that you're selling. And another scales delivery, which means you being able to handle more than 10, 15 different clients at the same time. So if one engine fails, what do you expect happens? Obviously, the whole machine stalls. So what do you then do? You need every part of the engine to be optimized, rigged for scale, and tested under extreme pressures for you to be able to understand where your stress levels for your systems are and how to best optimize for that. So with that, you create leverage infrastructure that runs a $10 million business on $1 million worth of effort. So that's the game. That is what this framework is all about. So if we go even deeper, we can see that TLE stands for expose, architect, rig, force, and multiply. And you'll see how all these add up to basically optimizing your system and creating that roadmap that allows you to have a clear picture. So with this, I've designed it in such a way that it is a plug and play template so that you can just plug and play and twist things around to make sure that it suits your business's specific needs. So with this, we can see the first one is expose, which mainly focuses on ripping open the hidden parts that kill profit. So with this, the purpose is to find the chokeholds costing your business 6 figures minimum. So these are things that you may not even be aware of that are actually causing your business not to scale within your entire system process. So with that, the core principle then becomes you can't fix what you can't see. Expose the mess at its core using first principles, which means that you're stripping the system down to its elements to the main reason as to how it functions and then reasoning up from there, or it will own you if you don't understand this. With this, then you can ask a question, which is where's the real damage? Is it causing time, cash, or scale issues? So an example of this could be your sales team is chasing dead leads, which leads to $50,000 worth of loss because your team is constantly chasing leads that aren't really worth chasing, which will ultimately lead to a lot of inefficiencies within your business. And another example of this is how manual invoicing eats 15 hours a week, which results into $30,000 worth of labor bleed. And the worst part of this is you don't want to bleed labor. If people are doing manual tasks when it could be automated, that is basically forcing them away from focusing on what actually generates you revenue within your entire system. And if you don't understand where this manual labor, where you can optimize, you are going to be bleeding a lot of labor, and it's your job and your responsibility to fix that within your business. And now We can also see another example of this would be no data on client churn, $100,000 slipping quiet. If you don't track data in terms of how many clients you're churning and adding back into your system, if you're adding 10 clients but you're losing 5, then that's not optimal in the long run. Then you're going to hit a ceiling where you're not going to be able to grow within your system. And now that comes to you then understanding how to optimize within your system. And that's where the plug and play template comes in, where you basically say profit killers exposed are killer number 1 costs X amount. You always need to make sure that you assign a cost to it, because if you don't assign a cost to it, you're not going to know the value of the problem that it's causing within your business. And then killer 2 costs X amount, which you can then add a third killer. It just depends how many killers you do identify, and then adding the total bleed per month, because if you add the total bleed per month, then you can see how big of a problem this is within your infrastructure. And then if we go into the second one, we can see architect, which basically means design the leverage machine. And this is where you actually do the designing, the figuring out part of how to design this leverage machine of yours within your system. And the purpose of this is to build a system that turns chaos into cash flow. Because the most important thing is you want cash flow. You need to be able to turn this chaos or this inefficient process into cash flow. So that is what architect basically means. And the core principle for this is leverage isn't just in the tools, it's how we engineer outcomes, how we can create the outcomes in order to lead to an ROI that yields more customers staying longer within the process, and also the team understanding how to best utilize the resources within the business. We either architect it right or we don't bother. So then you can ask yourself a question, which is, what's the shortest path to kill this bleed and stack as much ROI as possible? You need to kill the bleed, and you need to build a system or design a system in order to best yield the results that you need within your business. So with that, an example of that could be your leads are dying. So what do? You architect. So your CRM filters, auto ping, sales assigns, and then close tracked. It's basically designing the system that allows you to reduce as much friction as possible. So for example, you can then look and say slow invoicing. You can architect client signs, then the Stripe fires, and then team is notified, and that is the end of the process. Keep it simple as possible. The least amount of steps that you have in the process, the better. And with this, you can use the plug and play template, which you can say to kill the killer number 1 from step 1, the leverage machine is step 1 of the system, step 2, step 3, and then this saves X amount and drives X amount of ROI, which is very important because you need to assign a value to that problem, and you also need to do it per month, because if you don't do that, you're not going to understand how much it's impacting your revenue or your bleed per month. And with that, we can then go to the third step, which is rig, bolt it down fast. So the purpose of this is basically to get the machine live with 0 delays. The core principle of this would then be execution eats perfection for breakfast. Rig it now, tweak it later, you will not regret it, and solving it as soon as possible. With this, you can then ask yourself the question of, what's the fastest way to make this real in 48 hours so that you have something that you can tangibly touch and see and feel and test if it works? Because if you don't have anything, not even a skeleton, you're not going to understand how to best optimize for that. And then an example of this could be your CRM filter. You can rig Zapier plus Slack by the end of the day tomorrow. Another one could be Stripe invoicing, rig templates plus triggers by tonight. The sense of urgency is super important here, because you need to have something up and running as soon as possible so you can test if it actually works or not. And then with this churn data, you can rig a Google Sheet dashboard by Friday. Now it gets to the interesting part, where we can use this plug and play template and say rig it with action number 1, and then you need to assign a tool, such as what tool are you going to be using, plus a deadline, because that creates a sense of urgency for your team and also within the system to get the actions up and running. with action 2 with tool plus deadline, and then action 3 as well with tool plus deadline, and then live by date, and then no stalling. You need to make sure that by the date that you've set, the site or the solution that you've created is up and running as soon as possible. And then with that, we can then go to number 4, which is the force. Break it before it breaks you, which the purpose would be to hit the system with a hammer until you find out where its limits are. The core principle for this is a $500,000 machine won't survive 5 million unless it is force tested to its absolute limits. With the question that you may ask yourself now is, where does it crack under load, and how do we reinforce it so that it can withstand bottlenecks that come with scale? Because you need to be able to understand where its breaking points are for the system so that you can cater towards that. Because if you don't have that data, when it does break, you're not going to know what's going to happen. And if you don't break it before it breaks you, that is ultimately going to lead to more problems down the line. And then an example of this, we can say the CRM jams at 50 leads per day. Then what you do is you force it to 100, swap the API as well. This better helps you understand how to stress test your system so that you can be better equipped to basically force your system to handle more stress within it. Another example of this would be the team drops the ball at 10 clients, force clarity, redefine roles within the team. Invoicing lags at 200K per month, force automation, reduce the friction caused by having too many steps, because in this process you may have too many steps in terms of your invoicing process, which then ultimately leads you to lag in terms of your invoicing structure. So you need to be able to stress test the system to say, hey, we're going to force automation and we're going to reduce the friction caused by having too many steps within the process. And that will ultimately allow you to stress test your system and see where bottlenecks may lie. And this plug and play template comes from saying force test system part fails at what the limit is, steal it by, or basically reinforce it by the fix and then by the date, and then ready for X amount of scale. You always need to assign a dollar amount to that problem and how much it's going to scale into the future. Because if you don't understand the metric as to how big of a problem it is within your business, you're not going to take the appropriate steps in order to combat or solve that problem in the time that you're supposed to solve it. And it may cause even further issues down the line for your business. So you just need to solve it as soon as possible and assign a dollar amount to that. And then the fifth one would basically to multiply. Stack engines dominate the game. The purpose being to compound leverage to run a $10 million operation, with the core principle being one engine wins battles, a number of stacked engines wins war. Your role is to win the war, not just one battle. And how are you best going to be doing that? Is to stack your engines, your systems, stack as much leverage as you possibly can within your system. And the question you may ask from this is, what's the next profit killer that we can flip into a powerhouse? An example of this could be your leads are locked, multiply with delivery engine so that you're compounding your leverage within your system. Delivery is tight, multiply it with payment engine. You need to multiply in order to compound how your results are going to look into the future. Payment smooth, multiply with team ops engine. You need to stack as much leverage as you possibly can within your system, because one engine alone, if it stalls, it's not going to be able to run, and that is going to bleed a lot of revenue within your business. And then we can use the plug and play template where we can write down next engines are engine number 1 with a goal, engine number 2 with a goal, engine number 3 with a goal as well, build by date. This drives X amount of revenue, and the main point of this is to always assign a dollar amount to it so that you know the scale of the problem that it is within your system. So we can use real world use cases for this. An example of this could be lead leverage engine, where we expose $75,000 lost on unqualified leads last quarter. Architect, lead in, CRM scores, auto email, sales book cold. Reduce friction as much as possible in architecting the design or creating the design for this solution. Rig, Zapier plus HubSpot, live by Wednesday. Force, handles 30 leads per day, cracks at 60, then you need to upgrade scoring by next week. Assign a timeline to it so that you understand when you need to solve this. And then multiply Stack Client Onboarding Engine next month. Another example of this would be the Payment Leverage Engine, which would be to expose 20 hours a week on manual billing, which then results to $40,000 in labor bleed, which you don't want as a business owner to bleed a lot of labor when they should be focusing on the tasks that actually bring in revenue. With that, you can then architect, which the client signs, Stripe auto charges, team is slacked, and then it is logged. With that, then you can rig and say Stripe by plus Slack rigged by Friday, which then force you then say it works at 300K per month, lags at 500K, cut steps by next sprint, which allows you to understand how to better optimize the system as a whole. Then you multiply, which is Stack Team Ops Engine next, and then the execution tip for this is run TLE every 30 days, expose, architect, rig, force, and multiply every action. This is how we scale to millions with no shortcuts. So, final thoughts. This is how I will build for $500,000 plus businesses, solving their $100,000 plus messes with systems that print money and solve problems. And this is how you stack leverage engines within your system. And if you guys would like to learn more, make sure to check out the comments. I've pinned the link to this document so that you can use it as a plug and play within your business. And if you guys found any value from this, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.